And thank you so much for staying with us again on the first episode of this show of 2025. Now, in the first half of our program, where we'll be exploring significant elections and the wave of protests that marks 2024. Now, in Nigeria, the Edo State governorship election was a notable event, with the All Progressives Congress APC's candidate, Monday Okpebholo, emerging victorious. Now, on the international stage, the United States witnessed a historic moment with Donald Trump's re-election. Everybody was talking about that one. Meanwhile, in the United Kingdom, the United Kingdom, I beg your pardon, experienced a political shift with the Labour Party's landslide victory, bringing Keir Starmer to the position of Prime Minister. We're coming back to Nigeria now, where the Rivers State local government elections proceeded as scheduled, I beg your pardon, despite the initial uncertainties that were witnessed across the state.
Now, moving to the protests that echoed across nations, Nigeria witnessed the #EndBadGovernance protest in August. Additionally, the organized labor launched an indefinite strike affecting multiple businesses and states, including the Federal Capital Territory. In Kenya, on the other hand, protests erupted over the proposed finance bill, which aimed to increase taxes to address government debt. The United Kingdom was not exempt from unrest, experiencing a series of anti-immigration demonstrations and riots across multiple cities.
And as we reflect on these events, several questions will begin to arise. Now, let's begin with elections. And of course, we're not going to be doing this alone. We have our very first guest for the year, and is none other than our broadcaster of international repute, Benga Barwa. It's good to have you, Benga.
Thank you very much, Bernard, and blessings. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you join us.
All right, thank you so much for joining us, Benga. And so now we're going straight into it. And I'd say the first thing we should look at is, what do the outcomes of these elections indicate about the shifting in political ideologies, in these different regions. There was somebody who said to me earlier that Donald Trump, starting from there, is not exactly or has not exactly been a politician all through. He's just been in politics for 10 years. And now we've seen him come into power twice, right? Monday Okpebholo of Edo State was never favored to win. Of course, under several circumstances, he eventually won. And then the drama that we saw in Rivers State, some say it was local government selection. Some say the election ended even before it started. And then, of course, there's the UK elections. Benga, what do you make of
where do we start from? I mean, politics is local everywhere. So let's start from the United States. I mean, a lot of Americans were disappointed in the Democrats. Joe Biden has been there for 4 years, having served as Obama's vice president in previous administrations. So it's a return of Trump. And I mean, like you said, he's not a career politician. He's a showbiz man, and he does say those things that matter to the electorate. He's studied, he's gone back to study and, read the political terrain, and has been able to use it to his advantage. And he has done it with the help of his new bestie, Elon Musk, the owner of Tesla and X. And it was almost a landslide. The Democrats didn't believe it, and they almost got arrogant about it. They had a sort of entitlement mentality, appealing to their traditional base, the black people. And the black people said, you know what, we've been voting Democrat all this while. Of what benefits has it done to us? And Trump was able, he's very businesslike, highlight his policies. And again, the fact that Joe Biden was traditionally meant to be on the ballot, but because of old age and other reasons, Kamala Harris came in, and she just couldn't compare to a juggernaut
like Donald
Trump.
I think mine is the concern. But I say it's concern. I don't know if we still buy the. You said something about saying things that matter to the people. I think that we should have outgrown that by now. I'm not saying that, everybody has their manifesto, but I think even down to the African continents, people are still swayed by, the language and these people know how to massage your emotions. They know the right words to use at the right time, so they preach the message of hope, and we're so quick to buy it. Do you think that was the case in the US elections, or do you think that they were just tired? It felt like they were gambling their choices at the time.
I mean, that's what it boils down to be frank. At the end of the day, in any settings, people tell you sweet words. The work of a politician is to convince you the most on why he is a better candidate than the opposition, and that's what happened. So it's not really about, at the end of the day, will they follow through their campaign promises? That's another part to look at.
Definitely. It reminds me of a story that someone told me. I'll summarize the story. So this young man died and was about to go to either heaven or hell, and then the gates of heaven were thrown open. He saw angels singing and dancing, but the gates of hell were thrown open too, and then he saw a lot of artists celebrating, and there was food and drink and everything. And then they said they gave him 1 week to decide, and after 1 week he said, no, I'm going to hell. That's where it's bubbling. He got there and the thing changed, and devil was whipping and all. And then he asked, why is it different? And devil said that was campaign period. So just to lighten the mood, and truly it's different. We get politicians saying all sweet things, and it happens everywhere around the world, like you said. But I want to bring in another conversation that a lot of people, particularly down here, were having during the time of the US, and I'll bring in the UK elections as well. And of course, that's how foreign policies will now affect Africa and Africans. And you know that Nigerians like to migrate. Trump hammered largely on migration policies and laws, and the same thing too in the UK. So how do you think this changes now, or rather these new leaders and their policies, how do you think it will affect Africa and Africans? Or do you even think it would affect us?
Trump is very, you saw how Nigerians are. We're very conservative, and it's interesting to know that Donald Trump, despite the unfriendly words and unprintable words he used to describe Africa during his first term, you still have a lot of Africans backing him, I guess because of the religious and conservative nature of Africa, especially when it comes to LGBT rights and all of that. So they can forgive him for describing Africa in a type of light, but as long as, he's recognized only to gender as male and female, and he's not pro-LGBTQ.
Exactly.
They think, he's got religious sentiment and all of that. But aside from that, Trump is America first. He's a businessman. He believes that if there's nothing to gain from this relationships, what are we doing? But there's also the geopolitical impact. The United States has seen the influx of Russia and Africa, China, and they're trying to counterbalance that because the influence of China and Russia and Africa. Just recently, Joe Biden was in Angola to launch the Lobito corridor, which will help transport minerals and finished goods to the port of Angola for export. There's also the Africa Growth and Opportunities Act, which you might look at. But when it comes to the relationship is basically business and security concerns. I don't think there's much in it for Africans per se, because we have a more beneficial relationship with China when it comes to building infrastructure, access to unconditional loans, and all of that. But doing business with America, there are certain conditionalities, and they use the IMF and World Bank to push through some of this, their policies. And then the UK, remember we're in the age of Brexit. The UK is looking at what is called Global Britain. Since they're not negotiating as a bloc within the EU, they're developing relationships with the individual countries as the United Kingdom, which has made them more open to the world and doing business. So traditionally, Africa has lots of former colonies from the UK, and but the migration policy, the conservative government could not push through the Rwanda plan, the famous Rwanda plan, which planned to deport, to move migrant seekers to Rwanda. But it's still a big issue of contention in the UK, and let's hope. Let's see how that plays out. The government is still fairly new, the government of Sir Keir Starmer.
So very quickly, I want us to take a look at the protests that we saw in 2024, especially in the on the African continent. We saw protests erupt from, of course, Nigeria more than one time. We saw in Kenya, Mozambique, Uganda, I think. And I think one of the most dominant things about those protests is that we're beginning to see a more youth-led protest, right? So I think my question to you would be, what are the major socioeconomic issues that you think would have led to these protests, and why do you think the youth are now, there's a certain kind of awakening that the youth have that are making them drive the protests, like being at the forefront of these protests?
I mean, it's just simple. Look at the demographics. Africa has the largest youth population in the world, and they're enlightened. They have access to the internet. They are more, they're very brave. It's the TikTok and Instagram generation. And look at the protests in Kenya. They were led by Gen Zs, and they actually forced the government to rescind the finance bill. So protests do work, and they made sure they were vocal, even though there was pushback from the government, there were lots of arrests. As we speak in Kenya, the human rights activists there complain of abductions and what have you. But the new generation, the Gen Zs, have come to show that, look, they're not pushovers. They're not like our fathers that would, sit on the negotiating table and let this drag on and on. They're going to take matters into their hands. And we've seen that happen in Kenya. Even in Nigeria, the End SARS protest against police brutality, Nigerians are very vocal. It doesn't necessarily have to be a major protest, just social media hashtag campaigns against certain things, and we see results. The police spokespersons of all these commands always come out to say, okay, this happened in our state, we'll investigate. So we've seen the power of youth-driven protest.
And going forward, clearly, we've seen, like you stated, we've seen certain policies change because of these protests, particularly in Kenya, But do you think this going forward would affect any change, or how do you think it would affect the way government is being run eventually, particularly in Africa, if at all there will be any effect on government and governance?
I mean, it depends on context. Exactly. Like Africa is very different. We experienced end bad governance protests in Lagos. And if you juxtapose and compare to what happened in Kenya, it's a different ballgame. In Nigeria, it was stifled, especially, we can speak for Lagos, Nigeria, because we're on ground, I guess because of the hangover or the fear of what happened during the End SARS protest. So you have, but the government still responds. They don't have to physically chase everyone away from the streets, but you force them into a conversation, into a debate on these policies, and that's the power and beauty of democracy. But not all of them would pan out to have, results that they want. But it's a good way of expressing one's displeasure with the system and also forcing the government to speak and communicate with the people.
But my hope in all of this, honestly, is that particularly in Africa, maybe in Nigeria, it's not just for the youth to spearhead changes, it's for them to also be part of the change. So I'm actually looking forward to seeing younger politicians, younger people in politics, as a matter of fact. And I think it starts with young people actually showing interest in active politics.
Yes.
Okay, so I want to say about that, right, that especially in Nigeria, there seems to be a threat scare. We saw a lot of protests erupt, but as quickly as it started, it died down, because there's this, it's now as though, it feels like Kenya, for example, you see that the youth were able to force the hands of the government. But here, it's like the government always has the upper hand. It's like they're always a step ahead. So you come out, they slam you with treason charges, and it's like you're fighting the youth from every corner. And I feel like that there's only so much youth can take before they become demotivated. We saw it in the last protest, right? Honestly, I've lost track of the hashtags, right? But in the last protest, you see a lot of youth say that, to what end? At the end of the day, they will arrest you. Now they are arresting minors, so let me just stay in my house.
So there's a sort of hopelessness, but there are different ways to protest. We have advocacy groups, civil society organizations. You see what SERAP does, trying to force class action suits. And politics doesn't, and advocacy doesn't mean, oh, we're conscious, we'll wait for 4 years. A lot can happen in 4 years before we vote out these people. That's the way, unfortunately, a lot of Nigerians think. There are means in the Constitution. You could recall your representatives in the National Assembly, there are constitutional ways to effect change, democratic ways of doing that, and letting your grievances be heard, rather than going out in the streets
but
with the sun,
really does
in the
seem
sun and all
like
of that.
the judiciary is complicit at this point. I'm not saying they're not doing enough, but if you look at it critically, I mean, we've gone to the point where they're saying if you don't like it, go to court with confidence, and it's as though they have the backing of the court.
I mean, it's a wake-up call for the judiciary, which has traditionally been known as the last hope of a common man, to really look inwards, look itself in the mirror, and also and be that last hope of the common man.
All right, last hope of the common man, but it's not the last part of the show. We'll be going on this quick break, and when we come back, we'll be moving from politics to economics of some of the things that happened in Africa last year, 2024. Do stay with us. My name is still Bernard Akede.
Many thanks for staying with us. And I just got the memo. We have to remind you of our name. So my name is still Blessings Bosugu. And thanks again for being here on this segment with us. We turn our focus now to Nigeria's economic challenges in 2024 and the proposed solutions for 2025. Now, as you know, Nigeria faced a severe inflation crisis in 2024, with rates soaring to 34.6%. Contributing factors included recurring fuel scarcity, multiple national grid collapses, which might still be collapsing at this point, which also disrupted daily life and economic activities. The national grid's instability was particularly alarming, with reports indicating up to 12 collapses within the year.
I know how that felt. Now, in response to these challenges, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu presented the 2025 Budget of Restoration, proposing a 47.90 trillion naira expenditure plan. The budget aims to reduce inflation from 34.6% to 15% and improve the exchange rate from approximately 1,700 naira per US dollar to 1,500 naira.
As we consider these developments, important questions emerge, and that's what we'll be discussing now. We still have our broadcaster of international repute, Benga Aboroa. Thank you for still being here.
Thank you very much.
A pleasure. Now, we're talking about the economy of 2024 in Nigeria especially. There was a topsy-turvy movement, right? And at some point, it just stopped going up. You know, it just went downhill, and everyone in Nigeria had to adjust. And we've always said it, that Nigerians are very, you know, it's like we're elastic. Yes, like the more we face, the more we learn to adjust. So I think my first question would be, what would you say were the major causes for the economic decline that was recorded? I think this is the worst we've ever had it.
Let me start by this. I was going through social media today and I saw a certificate of survival for every Nigerian. You guys need to, I need to print it.
I need one.
Surviving 2024. You know, on the 1st of January 2024, if they told you that, you know, the dollar was going to cross the 1,000 mark, we're going to pay 1,000 naira plus 1,000 naira for petrol, you would say never in your wildest
Especially that
dreams.
petrol. Never.
And we've lived through it. So just imagine what the average Nigerian is going through. So Nigeria, I mean, economically changed on the 29th of May 2024 when the president at Eagle Square said subsidies gone. I mean, we've all had this conversation, this debate about subsidy, how, I mean, there's a corrupt cabal that benefits from it. But it looked like, you know, in spite of everything that was happening in Nigeria, this was the only thing the common man could gain from government, cheap source of energy. And the president took that, I mean, just swept it off everyone's carpet. And not just that, I mean, it's a good decision on paper. Number two, he floated the naira at the same time. So the economy had to deal with this twin shocks, which just sent prices going up. And we know Nigeria, what goes up, Nigeria defies the law of gravity.
Exactly.
It never comes down in Nigeria. So the people have had to, the government has come in response to some of this economic hardships. They've talked about CNG initiatives and all of that, but it hasn't really done much for the common man on the street. But there's a silver lining at the end of the day. There are positives that happened economically in Nigeria. We're not the deregulation of the downstream sector. We've seen the Dangote refinery come online, and I believe Port Harcourt refinery is producing some capacity, and just recently Warri refinery. So few queues would be a thing of the past. Hopefully. If we can, because at the end of the day, you still need the crude oil. If you can meet up with production, and there's a high demand for crude oil. But Nigerians have been very resilient, and let's hope we'll start. The government has said there will be benefits from this economic policies. Let's hope the common man will reap the benefits.
So that's the thing, like, what is the, and I think that this conversation emerged when we still, towards last year, it's now last year, when we were talking about the budget proposal by the president. The question was, we're hearing trillions and billions and millions fly over our heads. The common man is not, it's not reflecting on the, in the pockets of, what is the essence of being governed when everything you're hearing seems like it's from afar? The only thing that reaches you is a problem.
Exactly.
You know? So I don't know how long, and I don't know how feasible it is for us to implement what did not happen last year. You know, when we say that the common man will start to benefit, I don't see any. And again, this is the problem with the government when it comes to implementing some things. We hear a lot of vague promises. Okay, we'll make sure that the common man benefits. How? There is no proper documentation of how things are going to get better for an average Nigerian, but we just keep hearing. And then at the end of the year, hopefully not, we'll start hearing you have to be more hopeful, you have to be more persistent. Somebody was telling us to learn to manage. That's a problem.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, and then the optics of this managing. The government says Nigeria should tighten their belt. But you see the purchases, you see
you understand?
the large entourages, you see the convoys. I mean, the optics don't give a message that they are trying to tighten their belt from their own end. And that's why there's a perennial trust deficit between the governed and the government.
Yeah, it's almost like they live in an alternate reality. And speaking about, you know, about the people, the government and the governed generally. Now, the president put forth this budget, and I was talking about reducing inflation rate from about 34 point something percent to 15% in a certain period of time. You think that's feasible within that time?
No, the president is what he wishes will happen. It's not realistic. But the reality is different. I mean, how do you
intend to do that?
Achieve that? But the one positive that I've seen flicker of hope from last year is improved power supply.
Well, yeah, you
but
can
at
say
a
that.
cost.
Yes. So
thank you.
You know, whether you like it or not, what's it called now, Band A?
Yes.
It's almost like at some point everybody was just pushed to Band A. I mean, thankful, like you said, you know, thankful power supply has really improved. But yeah, at a cost. Now, it's if the people can afford that cost.
So even that, even with that, people are still crying. Business owners who want, some people, I've seen people who would rather buy fuel into their generator because they can no longer cope with the price of their prepaid
So you finally get power, and then it's beyond the reach of the average person. And these are things the government needs to look at. Small and medium-scale enterprises are the backbone of the Nigerian economy. The barber, the hairdresser, the vulcanizer, they need this energy to power their businesses. And if you look at, and even multinationals, if you look at the breakdown, the overall cost of most businesses, it's the energy, that the cost of production is just higher, and it gets back to power. I've not seen any economy that's industrialized. We keep talking about diversifying beyond petrol, looking beyond petrol, without proper energy infrastructure. And these are, and I also don't see a sense of urgency
to diversify. Now, I think we're not seeing a sense of urgency to diversify because the country and the leaders are still making a whole lot of money from petrol and crude oil, and so for them, they're not going to. Nobody's going to
lazy. Look at the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. They are known for. I mean, Aramco is the most valuable company in the world. They are one of the largest oil producers in the world, but they're thinking beyond oil. So if a conservative Saudi Arabia is now holding boxing matches, they're looking at sports, Formula One, and all of that. If Saudi is doing that, don't you think we should be scared? And there's also the electric vehicle revolution that is picking up. China is making cheap EV vehicles. It will get to a time we might start using our petrol for cooking oil if we're not careful. We will drink that petrol.
I said that while I was serving. You know, at some point when I served in Rivers State, by the way, this was many years ago, and there's a conversation about crude oil, and I was saying, look, the world is diversifying from crude oil. If we're not careful, we'll be forced to drink our crude oil. I was almost forced out of the bus for saying that, that day, honestly, because
it's the reality.
It is the reality.
See electric vehicles, even in Lagos now, I'm sure you can see.
Yeah, so, you know, you're talking about China. There's a Chinese company that's in partnership with the Lagos state government, and they started bringing in some of these vehicles. Before the end of this year, a certain number of those vehicles should be in Lagos, already operational, you know. But speaking about, you know, vehicular movement and vehicles and petrol costs, we can't deny that, like some have said, again, just like Blessings said, we always see hope, you know, Nigerians. So even when people complain about fuel crisis and the challenges of 2024, there are those that said, well, thank God, this is the first December that we did not see fuel scarcity.
Yeah, we would look for that.
You know, something to hold on to. However, the point I'm trying to bring out from there now is, towards the end of the year, we did see something interesting, like Dangote dropping the price of petrol, pump price of petrol. The NNPC also went into some kind of, I think, partnership with some fuel stations. And we're beginning to see prices drop from like 1,070 naira to 925, 935. Do you think it's worthy of celebrating?
I mean, in the long, it depends on how many liters you buy. Where you buy from. It's still, right? I mean, it's worthy of celebrating. I drive a V8 engine, so any drop in...
Once you warm your engine, 10 liters has gone. Once you rev it once.
And I'm sure those that buy in bulk, the industrial consumers would... 1 naira makes a lot of difference. So let's hope the more the availability of fuel, the more players will have, will cost a glut, and then force prices to come down. But I'm not too hopeful. They said, you know, to regulate cement, prices will come down. It didn't.
They never did.
And Nigeria has a way of defining economics.
Again, I think that this further reflects, you know, the earlier conversation we had about the common man being the ones to suffer.
Exactly.
The tomato seller would not buy petrol in bulk. So all these, when I heard that it was reduced, I was like, oh, to what? They said 900. And I'm like, what are we saying? You know, it doesn't.
When you want to celebrate reduction, you need to look at where we're coming from. Yeah. And the same thing with the president said the dollar rate. Where was the dollar rate this time last year?
Exactly. So yes, there was a time that for personally, 8,000 naira used to fill my tank. But now I can't. We go there and say you want to buy 8K.
Long time.
You understand? And that's just a year. Yes.
You know, now 8,000 naira gets you barely 8 liters.
And then sadly, whatever the reduction now is going to come in, would I call it tranches? Like we said in Nigeria, things don't just automatically, even if it comes down, it shoots up and then just a little drop. Everybody has had to adjust their budget. So it doesn't really make any difference whether it's 1,000 or 900. For the common man who could buy fuel of 200, 300 naira or 1,000 naira before and be okay with it, it doesn't make any difference because they've adjusted their budgets.
There's no corresponding increase in salaries.
And earnings, generally, you know. And still speaking about budget, well, I was going to say, 8,000 naira used to fill your tank. I'm sure you don't use a V8 engine like Benga.
I don't. So the funny thing is, it was like 2 months into when I just got the car, and I was like, 8,000 naira, that's my... So every week, I think my budget was like 40K for a month. I was balling.
Yes.
So imagine going from 40K
I'm sure you used
to
to respond to every invite.
Do you get? And now,
we're really
40K doesn't even fill my tank.
Gen Z will say everybody was buying car, I reached my turn.
Thank you.
Everything went up. But wrapping this up now, you know, you're talking about budget, and I'm going, you know, more national now. The president brought out those different allocations to different sectors of the economy concerning the budget and divided it. You know, there was a huge chunk going to things like security, going to infrastructure, education, healthcare. If you look at those figures, I don't have those figures now, but you know, some in their trillions, some in their billions. You actually think, and we had this conversation with Dakwa the last time, do you think that these figures would actually translate into the success of these certain sectors of the society? Remember again that it's not the first time we've seen a lot of money being allocated to a sector like security, yet we still have insecurity.
So it's that when it comes to security, I would say there's some progress. We're making progress. It's not like the way things used to be before, from where we're coming from, where Boko Haram will hold territory, and it was a serious. Every other week there was bombings. So, but what we see now, and this is the issue of banditry, which isn't nationwide. It's just in some section of the country. I mean, no country in the world would, if you look at their budget spendings, it's always on the high side. And we know,
but I'm so sorry to interrupt,
Yes.
but even the progress, is it not selective progress? Because we've talked about it. There was a time that there was a kidnap situation, and then they said, oh, thanks to the technology that they deployed, they were able to get them back. And I'm like, but that's not the first time we've had kidnap situations. Why don't we
where has
deploy
this
this technology?
technology been?
And then we've also, it wasn't just last week in Sokoto State that there was an accidental bombing of civilians.
so there needs to be transparency, they need to get rid of corruption, and they also need to see through the budget line by line, because they've promised the budget, they promised that this is what they need the money for, and they need to show workings. They need to really do the things they've promised. And I mean, security, there's still many gaps that we can see, like the kidnappers. I mean, where do they pay the ransom money to? There's technology, you have BVN. Why is there still, why are they still able to carry out this kidnappings? There's also the use of drones. They've expanded the drone warfare. I believe the Nigerian Air Force has increased its capabilities. Why can't they dismantle this bandit strongholds? Also the use of, there's a National Counterintelligence Center, the use of intelligence-driven security to prevent these things before they happen.
Yeah.
Because it's not all, we always, it's a action and reaction thing. We're used to that. Something bad happens and then you respond to it. We should have a way of preventing this things from occurring.
Definitely. I would have loved to continue the conversation, particularly when it comes to the aspects of education and healthcare. Those are two major parts that I think have still been suffering severely, and I do hope that you know, with the budget allocation this time, they'll enjoy. Unfortunately, we have to step on the brakes here. I was about to say step on the gas, but petrol is expensive.
Exactly. Don't play around like that.
So let's step on the brakes here. We'll go on a quick break. When we come back, we'll be looking at our first forecast for the year, what we're hoping to talk about, or things that will make the news in the coming week. Do stay with us.
Many thanks for staying with us. Now, in Bennett's words, it's time to look into our crystal ball to tell you what to expect, not just in the coming weeks now, but in the year that is, the plans for the year 2025. The first story here is that Nigeria will establish a national credit guarantee company in May 2025 to improve access to credit for businesses and individuals. Now, this initiative, part of President Tinubu's economic reform agenda, aims to bolster financial inclusion and stimulate economic growth.
And from Nigeria, we're going to Zimbabwe, which will be our last story concerning the forecast. Now, Zimbabwe's president, Emerson Mnangagwa, has approved a law that abolishes the death penalty in southern African states with immediate effect. Now, the president's move comes after Zimbabwe's parliament voted earlier in December to scrap the death penalty. Before we go, I think we can quickly touch on these. Let me start with Nigeria now, first of all. Benga, it's not the first time that we're seeing, I mean, Buhari and Oshibajo's government did also find ways to aid financial inclusion and help put money in the hands of particularly poor Nigerians. There was the
Anchor borrowers,
you know, and all of that. How successful, you know?
I mean, most Nigerians believe that anything that comes from government as a loan should not be paid back, and we need to find a way of discouraging that. They believe it's their turn to eat, and finally they get the chance to eat from the national cake. And the only reason why they can get away with that is because of weak data and database. We have BVN, we have NIN, but they've not been able to harmonize it. That's why banks are reluctant to give non-collateral based loans. And that's why even this agencies that give small loans will go as far as doing very unethical things and threats and disgrace. Sometimes they put posters like, this gentleman is owing us money, come and pay back. And it shouldn't get to that. I like that. I mean, the developed world, credit is very important. The US, for example, has a credit-based economy, and it allows you to free money to do other things. It helps to stimulate the economy. So I hope we're looking at it holistically, and it's not just another white elephant project.
So speaking of what people believe, another belief which has not been proven wrong over time is that there is so much bottleneck and bureaucracy when it comes to borrowing. The US that you mentioned, it's a functioning system. You go, in fact, immediately you get there, once you jackpot, you get there, you're seeing people with new phones, new cars, and you're like, is that how things are? But no, it's credit, you know. So one thing that I would advocate is do not put out, because again, we've said this time and time again, Nigerian government has a way of putting out an information, a law or something, then they now go back and start thinking of how to, you know, implement it.
Yeah.
Instead, sit down, think of a working system, how to get the money back, how to make sure these people get access to exactly. And then if it's like the student loan, then I'd rather not, you know, because there's a lot of things that are involved. Bring somebody with level this one, level 12, this one, and these are people that just want money to eat.
True.
Yes, make access easy and make it easy to recover your money. But you don't need to make it so difficult.
Exactly.
Bureaucracy, we need your king's signature and all of that.
And it's almost a situation of who you know.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, that has come to play several times in Nigeria, and it's still coming to play, you know, nepotism and all of that. Very quickly now, we jump to Zimbabwe, and I'm glad to talk about this, not because it's death, but the death penalty, and it's a conversation I like to have with people. I've had with several people before. I studied sociology, and this is one question I try to push around. Now, Emmerson Mnangagwa wants to sign, he's going to sign, you know, the abolition of the death penalty. Now, there has always been, you know, a line or a divide where people stand aside. Some are for and some are against. And here's why, largely. Now, some people will say, people who, you know, felons who have committed felonies, grave offenses, should be put to death immediately. There's a school of thought that believes that the death penalty is an easy way of letting people go. Now, somebody has committed gruesome crimes, committed murders. Look at terrorists and bandits, for example, who have killed people, right? And then you say death penalty, instantly they die. While others are of the opinion that, no, they should actually suffer, they should be punished, so people know that this is what they have done, and it can serve as a deterrent, you know, to the people. But there's still another school of thought that believes that why should we be spending taxpayers' money to keep, you know, to keep feeding them and housing them?
And eventually they might get amnesty.
Or there might be a flood or tsunami and they escape.
And they escape, like we've seen in several cases, right? So, again, is this a welcome development? And I know the world is advancing, right? And so death penalty is being taken away.
The general conversation is that it's barbaric because, you know, there could be miscarriage of justice. And we've seen it before. So my own opinion is if it's proven, if the person is caught red-handed, the person should, an eye for an eye, should be killed. Like Anders Breivik, for example. This Norwegian guy attacked holiday goers in an island in Norway, killed over 20 people. This guy is doing a degree in political science in the University of Norway. He's complaining that he's using a typewriter. He wants a PS5. Do you know how insulting it would be
it is to the families of the victims?
If he's died, I mean,
there'll be some closure and they'll move on.
Exactly.
I think Benga took the words right out of my mouth. The only thing that scares me is the miscarriage of justice. If that wasn't the case, I honestly would have been 100% an advocate for it. Many people would say, no human should take another human's life, but they took one life first before they, you know.
Sometimes more than
but we've seen situations where there's either classism or racism at play, and then before you know, someone has landed in prison, and then they're accused. There's this humongous accusation about something that you didn't even do. Look at the youngest, was he 14? The youngest boy that was put to death. That story still scars me. He had no idea who the girls were, but he was killed for it, and then years later they found out that he was innocent.
There's also a school of thought, Karma school of thought. There are people that say that Karma, like in America, you watch cold case files. They bring out a case from the 1980s and they solve it. They say, in this part of the world, Karma. Just leave it to Karma.
Karma doesn't exist.
Karma doesn't get paid to work over time.
I know, right? Anyway, that's the size of our show today, and you know, it's been quite a good one, I must confess. Thank you so much for joining us, Benga.
It's a pleasure.
We hope to see you more often.
It's a pleasure.
All right, like I said, that's the size of the show. Thank you for joining us on the very first episode of Report Desk Africa 2025. We hope to be very permanent on the show this year as much as we can. I know Blessings will respond to that. But definitely, my name is Bernard Akede. Thank you so much for joining us.
Bernard, you've said your name 3 times. We've heard enough of it. And Blessings Masugu. Have a beautiful 2025. See you again in our subsequent episodes.